everybody. Lance Russell and Dave Brown right along ringside. By golly, we're about ready to go with more big action.
Thank you very much, and welcome to Georgia Championship Wrestling. I'm Gordon Solie, your host, and we have quite an hour in store for us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Championship Wrestling at ringside. This is Vince McMahon, along with wrestling's only living legend, Bruno Sammartino.
Welcome to this week's edition of Mid-South Wrestling Television. I'm your host, Boyd Pierce, another outstanding card.
Hey, guys, and welcome back to the Regional Rasslin Podcast, where we talk the territories. I am Ray Russell, and this week, it's been a while. In fact, it's been far too long since we went back in time to the LeBell territory, talking about LA, the dying days of the Los Angeles territory, the early 1980s. In fact, 1982 to be exact here this week. Got to look at some of the final cards throughout the year of 1982, some of the talent involved, and a lot of the behind-the-scenes stories going on with the talent, with the promoters, and everything in between. And in order to get to all of that, we're going to bring back on to help me wrap up this particular project. He is a SoCal legend in his own right, or maybe his own mind, or maybe that's my mind. Nevertheless, one of the coolest cats I've ever met. He is the one and only, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the program, Mr. Vandal Drummond.
Oh, thank you for having me once again. Been looking forward to this, and it's always fun just looking over that last year, 1982, the last year the LeBell promotion was still running shows, sometimes poorly, sometimes nice little surprises, and yeah, I'm looking forward to this.
I think you wrapped it up right there in a nutshell. Sometimes poorly, but sometimes some really fun surprises as I went through the results and things. So I'm looking forward to getting into all of that with you. But first, Vandal, we talked just briefly offline, and I know you said you wanted to make a few mentions here at the top of the program about the passing of a certain gentleman.
Yes, Johnny Legend, who has been a friend of mine for, gosh, I think it's going on 45 years now, or 35 years rather. Johnny was a little bit of everything to the B culture, the C culture, or the D list of movies. He was a very campy cat who had a band called Johnny Legend, and I'm forgetting things. This is Rockabilly Bastards. I'm getting old. I had to think of that name. The Rockabilly Bastards, that's what they were. He passed away January 3rd at his sister's house. I had not been in touch with him for, I think the last time I was in touch with him actually was around 2015 when we were at a memorial at the Beverly Cinema for Eric Hayden. And Eric Hayden and Johnny Legend both had such a presence and are just part of kind of the Southern California D-list celebrity soul. They, for people who don't know Eric Hayden, he was a guy who ran a place called Hollywood Book and Poster, where there's tons of wrestling history for sale there. I think he bought a lot of it from Jeff Walton. There, if any of you are into that company, Something Weird Video, that has a lot of trippy videos and DVDs for sale. That was one of the many items that was at Eric Hayden's store. It was like a go-to place. And often I would be in Eric Hayden's store and the phone would ring and it would be Johnny, and we'd have a three-way conversation where we're tossing the phone back and forth to each other rather than on speak. That's how ancient the systems were. but Johnny Legend, wrestling-wise, promoted incredibly strange wrestling. And he started working with a woman named Audra Morse on it in 1995. And the next 2-3 years was when it was active the most. And I just have memories of Johnny and I calling each other like around 1 a.m. because, neither of us were working a full-time job and we were up till all hours. And I just remember just coming up with just the freakiest ideas for this promotion, which would actually look really tame now compared to pro wrestling today, but right. Incredibly strange wrestling had such out there gimmicks, all just, some of it very wrong and some of it very good. And often the wrong stuff was the most famous, the right. Kinkier stuff. It was a fun time in my life, and, with people like, friends like Dan Farron, and the late Larry Doyle. We had a couple of really fun years there of just having the ultimate Lucha Libre block party. Whenever you were on a card promoted by Johnny Legend, it was like you were at a party. And I couldn't really do him justice in this tribute without taking up the entire time of the show. But, Johnny Legend, you are missed. And I suspect he had been in ill health for a while. And I'm very thankful that he had his sister and brother-in-law to live with. I think they were up in Oregon. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of do a quick stream of consciousness tribute to my friend. And stream of consciousness, I could have done a more formal one, fully written down, but I know that's the kind of thing Johnny would loathe. He likes more the deer in the headlights. Yeah, coming from, I don't even know if I want to say coming from the heart, just coming from the mind, coming from the soul, coming from the memories and the great times. I mean, I remember the early days of the infancy of the internet and reading about the incredibly strange world. I'm like, what on earth are they doing? So it's very cool. Oh, wow. So you were aware of it way back then?
Oh, yeah. I didn't know a whole lot about it.
Great.
Just the random things you could read. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is not the wrestling that I grew up on, but it was definitely different.
Oh, man.
Like you said, that you guys walked so that they could run today with the nonsense that we get out there sometimes.
Yes, exactly. Exactly, because it's so funny to think how tame it is compared to today's product. Right. I'll never forget Johnny and Dan Farron and I were just over the top happy when we came in 5th place for most disgusting promotional tactic in the Wrestling Observer newsletter.
Thanks,
Dave. Oh God, that and now they just probably think of it as kind of wacky wrestling. I'm sure our wackiness has been outdone, but I'm glad I got to be part of the roots of that.
Absolutely, and you talked about coming in 4th or 5th place on the Observer. That kind of segues us into final credit here. We're gonna give some credit this week before we get going with our final year of 1982 in the LeBell territory. This goes for the upcoming episode and all past episodes we've done, Vandal. I want to shout out to Jeff Walton, of course, his son Scott Walton, Dave Meltzer for the Observer, and Tim Hornbaker, Steve Yohei. I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce it. I'm going to break the fourth wall. I asked Vandal off air. I said, how do you pronounce it? I've been reading Steve's name for as long as I've been online, but you never hear it spoken, so I wasn't quite sure. So I wanted to hit every variation possible, and so I'm going to give him all the credit in the world for all that. Whether his name is Yohei Yahoo, he's a great guy. Steve, however your last name is pronounced, we salute you. He'll tell us that we pronounced his last name correctly, and his first name is actually Steva or something along those lines. Throw us completely off here. Of course, we're going to thank Rock Rims, all the great books he's put out, the Kayfabe Memories Board, all that old school information, wrestling classics, all the conversations there. And last but certainly not least, I must thank you, Vandal, for being a part of this ride. Oh, thank you for having me part of it. Oh, absolutely. But we're not done yet. We've got one more episode of Los Angeles here in the 1980s, and you can't talk about the demise without talking about the demise. So we're going to jump into the final year, 1982. It's a somber moment, but sweet at the beginning, bittersweet, I guess they say. And before we get going into some of the results, some of the names that jump out at me, talk about surprises and things like that throughout the year, I have a couple names at the top of the program I want to throw at you and see if you're any memories, any interactions. In fact, one of these, I know you probably have a few things on, but first I want to start. There was a wrestler that came through here around this time by the name of Killer Kim Sung-ho. And this guy, I did a little research on him quite a while back. Things didn't really make sense to me in regards to the time frame that he worked, because it looks like he worked obviously here in the LeBell territory, but also down in CMLL and various promotions in Japan. I'm hoping you can maybe shed some light on that one for me. Actually, I got to kill the buzz here for a bit, because this was a different Kim Sung-ho than the one in CMLL. Okay. The one who was active in the 70s. That Kim Sung-ho retired, I want to say, Rock Rims knows this much better off the top of his head, but I want to say he retired like 76 or 77 maybe. Okay. And he's still doing well. We both Rock and I did a lot of searching for him, and we got a hold of one of his daughters, and she sent us pictures of him present day, and the dude is in amazing shape. I mean,
he doesn't look. He's probably around in his late 70s, and he does not look that old. Looks really good. The Kim that you're referring to was actually the son of Kim Il, the South American king of wrestling.
Okay.
And I remember what an amazing worker he was. He was a great worker. I don't know much more detail other than what he did in L.A. I do know he is passed. If anybody wants info, I got that little bit of info from Fumi Saito in a text.
Very good.
So, in fact, I keep meaning to just ask him if he could tell me more about him, but lazy house cat that I am.
Not as lazy. Well, you're sitting there, you're sitting there finding family members and things, Vandal. You're not quite that lazy. I mean, you got some effort. It's like you're an episode of Unsolved Mysteries, man.
I take that as a great compliment.
Update.
One thing I love about the modern day internet is you can search for people, things, whatever. It's like you're like a little kid playing private detective, and you find all this great history.
Yeah.
The more you dig around on the internet highway.
Well, I appreciate you separating the two Kim Sung-Ho's there for me and for the listeners out there as well, because I was doing all this diving, and I'm going to be honest with you, some of it didn't make sense time-wise. That's where Vandal comes into play. He straightens it out for me here, and I'm looking forward to kind of continuing to do my own digging here on this Kim Sung-Ho of the 1980s. But
it is a very common name, I learned. And like I said, I don't know if I'm going to research more, but any history buffs out there would love whatever you can find if you guys are curious and search around for info.
100%. Well, here's another name I'm going to throw at you right now, and this one can be confused too, especially if you're looking into wrestling data and things like that, because it overlaps with another name very similar in the past. And I'm talking about Bobby Lane, a.k.a. Bobby Pico. And I know you had mentioned in the past you knew a little bit about Bobby Lane, so I wanted to take you back in time and talk a little bit about another guy who came through here in the early 80s and doesn't get the credit he deserves in the footage I have of him. He makes a damn good heel. And talk to us a little bit about Bobby Lane.
Bobby Lane is the second wrestler I got to be friends with when I started just hanging around, week by week at all the matches in the various cities. We first got to know Tim Flowers, and Tim Flowers and Bobby Lane. Were they sharing a room? No, I don't think they're sharing a room, but they were just kind of the Milner where all the wrestlers lived. I met him one night outside the Pantry, the famous steakhouse in L.A., and was introduced to him via Tim Flowers. And he was a fascinating guy. I really only knew him for about a year, but he was a guy in really, really good shape, very good-looking guy. I mean, the girls at the matches were pretty crazy over him. And he was the son of a wrestling couple, Bobby Pico Sr. and Ann Laverne. Mm-hmm. And he has a sister, Marie Laverne, who is still with us. And in a short time, I learned about just the business and the nature of the business and how it's. No, he was one who showed me the side of, this is a job. This isn't like living a fantasy. This isn't playtime.
Right.
He was very serious about his job, but what his job was, most of his career was enhancement talent. And he was quite proud of, as he put it, he said, I'm a jobber, and when somebody beats me, I make it look like they beat somebody tough. I make sure I look really badass out there. So when they come and clean my clock, it really means something. It was the first time I ever heard a wrestler boast about losing matches and the art of it. And, he grew up around the business, and you could kind of tell he had a kind of rough edge to him. I don't mean that in any kind of negative way, but you could see he's just living in the business. He's seen a lot. And the funniest part was when he came to L.A., he was booked like in main events right away. And I'll never forget when he was being told by somebody all the matches he's going to have over the next few weeks and how it would be like a title match or a semi-main event. He just had this look in his eyes, like he was like kind of wide-eyed and saying, why are they doing this? I'm a jobber. What I do is I job. He says, I work hard at it, but I'm good at it. And he was, the first time he was on the microphone, you never saw somebody look so uncomfortable. It was he had a train wreck of a polo of an interview.
Yes.
Yeah, promo. That's the word I was looking for. See what happens when I'm sober. It all falls apart. But the first promo was really awkward, and then just 2 weeks later, he started cutting promos like a complete pro. And I really didn't stay in touch with him after he left LA, but I actually just learned a lot about the biz just hanging with him, because the other people that I had met were more kind of like, boasting about what they were capable of, and complaining about how the promotion was being run, which you can't blame them. But he was the first guy I saw approach it as, well, this is a job I have, and I'm going to do it well. Someday I will not forget.
Well, that's cool. Good personal stories there, and you're being able to be around him and him realizing, I don't want to say it's his dream, because you said he was totally comfortable in his position on the card, but now he's getting an opportunity here in Los Angeles, and of course there are a lot of guys out, so it's next man up, and they're giving him an opportunity, and he does take full advantage of it while he's here for the brief time that LA's still kicking. And most I could really find on Bobby beyond here in Los Angeles is he's going to do a handful of matches in Portland the following year in 1983, and I can't really find a whole lot on him beyond that. So I'm not sure if he was forced out of the business or if he got out of the business, but he seems to finish up his wrestling career here in his mid-30s. So hopefully everything worked out for Bobby in the long run.
Yeah, I'm on and off. We'll be texting with his sister, who's still with us.
Right.
He passed away about, I think it was 3 years ago now. He was getting older, and I think he left the business on his own accord. When he was in the business, he had such great respect for the older wrestlers. A lot of that probably comes from him being raised by two older wrestlers.
Right.
And, something I'll say for him is he really had a great respect for first generation wrestlers. And, occasionally there would be, a wrestler in the dressing room making cracks about how old somebody is, and Lane would just shut them down. He would get in their face if they were knocking the veterans.
Well, that's cool. He certainly had respect. Respect your elders, but respect the business and the people who paved the way, so to speak. So that's very cool.
Exactly.
Stand-up guy, and I'm happy he had a little bit of an opportunity here, and I'm glad a little bit of the footage still is out there if anybody's interested. You can try to go find it. I'm hoping I can post some of it here myself very soon. But
if you could, I would love to see it. Isn't it amazing that there's these people in the business, in the 60s and 70s, and you try to find video of them, and you think it would be easy in this day and age. Just like Black Gordman and Goliath, you can find individual matches of theirs or them tagging with people, but finding footage of them actually as a tag team, there's not a lot out there, which really shocks me.
No, that's why I love reading as much as I can. Unfortunately, that's not watching the matches, but being able to read as much as I can on the memories and things of that nature with Gordman and Goliath and a few of the other talents there. We're lucky we even have that for us who weren't alive during that period or didn't grow up in the territories they worked when they were at their peak.
Yeah.
So we're going to go back right now. We're going to go back to look at some results, random matches from some of the house shows there in LA. We're going to kick things off looking in March 14th, loser leaves town match for the NWA America's Heavyweight title. The exotic Adrian Street has arrived here in the United States. I believe we talked about Adrian on the last episode we were together on, but here he defeats Sweet Brown Sugar, not Skip Young, but Luis Mariscal. We talked about that before. Mariscal had worked in the CMLL. He'd come from Mexico. He was a 12-year pro by this point. And you had hypothesized, we don't have it on picture proof of it, so to speak, but you had contemplated that maybe they were bringing in the actual Skip Young, and he decided to, maybe the payday's not good, or maybe he just decides to take another gig somewhere. But instead, they've already promoted the name. Instead of just dropping the name and forgetting all about it, they bring in Luis Mariscal, and he becomes Sweet Brown Sugar here. And he gets a little bit of a run in 1981, but by the March of 1982, he is losing a loser leaves town match. So maybe headed back to Mexico is this version of Sweet Brown Sugar. Adrian Street, the new champion. Yeah,
there were a number of guys like that in Mexico. They would come here and they'd do a run, sometimes for just 2 weeks or sometimes for a couple of months. He's a good worker. And to think of him as Sweet Brown Sugar, yeah, I 100% believe that Skip Young was probably pegged to go to L.A. and decided no.
Yeah,
and
it's a head scratcher.
Yeah, it's like the Chris Colt deal, how they said Mike Stallings is coming here. He is a decorated, amateur wrestler, has been all over the world, yada, yada, and you're expecting this clean-cut American boy, and out walks Chris Colt, who is the antithesis of all-American collegiate wrestler. It was just mind-boggling. It's like, yeah, why didn't they just say, oh, he was injured and can't come, or I don't know. Well, I remember Johnny Valentine was supposed to come here, I think, in '73, and instead of doing that, when where they give somebody else the name, when Gorilla Monsoon was coming to pass through as a heel, they made an announcement that Gorilla Monsoon has crippled Johnny Valentine and he'll probably never wrestle again, yada yada.
Yikes! That's scary thought, given the time frame too, because Johnny Valentine does, become crippled not too far off from.
Yeah, exactly. It was probably like a year or two before that, and it always baffled me. Why don't they just make it go away? Don't even mention it.
Yeah, card subject to change.
They
right?
did that. Yeah, it is. But one time I remember them just not even making any mention. There was a program. I can't remember if it was 81 or 82, but. Doug Vines and Jeff Sword with Izzy Slappa, which was supposed to come in as a tag team.
Yeah.
The announcement, they even had a picture, but they didn't come, and they didn't make any addition, any mention of it. It's just, which is probably how they should have handled the other ones anyways.
Right. Well, a couple of weeks later, they continue on with, we see a title change there. They're moving on to Adrian Street, getting that push. He's now here in the United States. March the 26th, Mil Mascara's back in town. We know we always pop the town, and he's going to be taking on defeating Pero Aguayo. That was a hell of a main event for Los Angeles to bring in Aguayo and Mil Mascaras here. They're going to do a disqualification finish. I also noticed Babyface was on that card as well, on the undercard, but Mil Mascaras and Pero in the main event.
Yes, that was the cool thing. 1982, even though it showed its weaknesses, and you could understand why they would go out of business at the end of the year. Mm-hmm. There were bright spots like this. There were, I'd actually like to look over I should have done this before on the air, but just looking at some of those rosters where there would be a super card sometimes. You'd have guys from Japan, Mexico, local guys. I remember there was one event, I don't know if this was the show, but around the time the Pero Aguayo versus Mil Mascaras match happened, there was such a star-studded cast of wrestlers, and they opened up the night with all the wrestlers walking to the ring to the Rocky theme song from the film Rocky.
Right.
And they're given flowers like they would do in Japan, and they were throwing streamers like in Japan. And you're looking at all the wrestlers, they're all these superstars, for the day. And here they are at the Olympic Auditorium at the promotion that is more known for monsters and,
not just monsters, Vandal, but the monster.
The monster, yes. The monster built in the laboratory of Pete Collins.
Another dirty promotional tactic.
Exactly. That one actually won.
Yes. I think that one invented the award. I feel like that year.
Wouldn't be, because it was the first time they were the first ones to be the recipients, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I believe so. I did notice here a week later, they keep Mil in town. Mil's coming back a week later, April the 2nd. On the undercard, Tony Atlas is here in LA. You don't really associate Tony with Los Angeles territory, but Tony's teaming with Mondo Guerrero. They defeat the team of Timothy Flowers and Bobby Lane. And in the main event, Mil Mascara's back again, but he's not working Pero Aguayo. They don't bring the match back even after the disqualification. Instead, it's Mil defeating the Iron Sheik versus Mil Mascara. That'd be
I was there for that one too.
Were you? Oh, wow. Do you remember anything about that?
Yeah, I was there for both of those.
Sounds like a contrast in
styles.
And
basically, both those matches were one of those matches where Mil played Superman and just made both Pero and the Iron Sheik, look desperate. Like, we all know the Iron Sheik was a legit tough guy, but he worked the match along what was no doubt Mosqueras' term, and he sold like Mosqueras like nobody. And same with Perro Aguayo, total pros. I remember guys used to bitch about having to sell so much for Mosqueras, and to be honest, I was one of those young smart-ass fans like, oh wow, Mil Mosqueras is coming, wonder who's going to win, a lot of us smarks back then thought along those lines. But when I look back on it in hindsight, I thought both Iron Sheik and Perro Aguayo did what, they pretty much is advertised on the menu. They made Mil Mosqueras look great. And, in fact, I'm trying to remember, was the Iron Sheik, I think that was a disqualification also. I'm not certain though.
Okay.
But yeah, Jeff Walton used to introduce him as the Superman of wrestling, Mil Mosqueras, and that's how they made him look here. Probably even more so in Mexico. They made him look almost invincible.
Well, yeah, I mean, I got to witness in recent months here, we've been covering the 1970s in All Japan, and Mil was really cooperative with the guys over there, especially in the early goings, and having some really fantastic competitive matches. But I do know by the 1980s, if it worked, that's the way they rolled. He was Superman, and I could see the Iron Sheik begging off. I just felt like it would have been more competitive there with Perro Aguayo, but I'm curious to see if Mil comes back here as I go through the results continuing on here, or if this was the final swan song for Mil Mosqueras working for LeBell specifically. But I noticed in June there's kind of a Japanese invasion of talent coming in here. Mr. Toyo, who becomes who was Rusher Kimura by this point, long time ago. Mr. Go, who I'm assuming was Ryuma Go, and Kid Kobe.
Ryuma Go, that is correct.
And Kid Kobe was Kuniaki Kobayashi. And they all come in here right around the same time.
I'm embarrassed to say the only ones I remember seeing were Rusher Kimura and Go. Okay. those were kind of a period where there was a lot of really lame shows. So me and my buddy who I went to the wrestling shows with, Lloyd, he was really into the punk and metal scene in LA. And for a while, I think we just got burnt out on just the LA story at the Olympic Auditorium.
Right.
And we started hitting a lot more local rock shows. So there are going to be bits and pieces of 1982 LA that are kind of a blank to me. And I remember kicking myself later saying, oh, damn, I didn't see Kuniaki Kobayashi when he was here, Kid Kobe.
Right.
And I heard he looked great. Yeah, that whole summer and even into the fall, my attendance was a lot more sporadic than before.
Did you feel like it was coming to an end at this point, or did you really not even think about things like that during this period?
No, I just thought they would plod along the way they were.
Yeah.
I always thought, what if somebody ran a serious opposition to him? Mm-hmm. And, something similar happened, but it wasn't really opposition. It right. was the McMahon's
exactly,
promotion from Mike LeBell.
Yeah.
So I think if you took that out of the equation, I still wonder to this day how much longer they had plodded along, because Art Williams, who's one of the unsung historians and one of the unsung heroes as far as being somebody who works in the LA office, I'd be curious to see what his observations were, because out of everybody I know from the old days of LA, he is the one who he would state very matter-of-factly that Michael Bell was a horrible promoter, that he did some good moves, like a combination of talent and luck brought us the very famous Freddie Blassie versus John Tolis match at the Coliseum. But Art Williams, I saw quoted as saying the dude didn't understand the business at all. He would hire a booker, expect him to make miracles in the next month, and if the box office wasn't like higher and higher, he got fired. It's like he was always in a panic just to make money. And one of his most famous lines was one he gave to Steve. Okay, here we go. Steve Yo hey, Steve A, yo hey. But Steve asked Mike LeBell, he asked him a couple of good questions. One was, why didn't you keep the tapes, the TV tapings? Why didn't you preserve them for history? And he told Steve, because I'm in this, because I was in the business for the money, not for the handshake. And the other thing he mentioned was who was the best draw as a feud. Like if you could bring anybody in, you're going to start over again. Who would you bring? And he just simply said, Mil Mascaras versus anybody. And he was right about that.
I was going to say that seemed to work. Yeah, that seemed to work, especially here in LA.
But apparently and I didn't know this until like both Jeff Walton and Art Williams said he loved being billed as a great promoter, but during the the prosperous times, it was on the backs of other people working for him, whether it was Booker Leo Garibaldi, his brother Gene, obviously.
Right.
It sounded like he didn't have a lot of heart into wrestling. He had a heart for promoting good wrestling and getting money out of it.
Well, my understanding, too, was Roddy and Chavo had a lot of input into what they were doing week to week for the long period they were on top here as well.
Yes, that's what I've heard. I do know there was a time when Chavo was booking.
Yeah.
And I didn't learn this until a few years after the promotion dissolved, but when Chavo came up, apparently it was Chavo who came up with that ideal of the R&R company, the heel club,
right? With
Bull Ramos, Alan Coage, Colosso Colasetti, Pistol Pete, just a whole batch of heels trying to take on All That Is Good. And I gotta say, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head during that period. That was like 1979, but it was a very good period when either Leo or Chavo were booking. And I'd love to know, I'd love to ask people, and I don't know why I haven't, how often did the booker position get passed on to somebody else like a hot potato? Because I didn't know until I think LeBell's passing that Kenji Shibuya was one of the bookers in the early 70s. So it's almost like everybody got a turn to, make
everybody
a little,
there you go.
Make a little, yeah, exactly. Everybody gets a turn to make a little miracle.
Well, he made me 10 grand. Let's see how many you can make. Yeah, it's everybody's. Let's see if it's going to go up or go down. And like you said, and I noticed that too when I was doing a lot of research in the 70s, how quickly he would just literally pass the book on to another guy. It was, wait a minute, wasn't this guy just booking for 2 months? So it does seem like Mike's always been, they've always said that he was I don't even know about a great businessman, but he looked at this not as a wrestling business, but as a business. He didn't really want to understand the wrestling business per se. He just wanted to see the green, basically, at the end of the day, and whatever that took. And so you hire the bookers to do that. And so I get that here. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. I do believe here in my notes.
Yeah. And I can't help but think if he let somebody kind of ride shotgun with him and have more say, I have no what he was like as far as getting along with. But I do wonder if he kept more steady bookers. Would that have made a difference?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you come in and you book. You got to get a feel for this territory and what they want to see and what works and what doesn't. So it might take a new booker a couple months to kind of get everything figured out and go from there, and the talent figured out and go from there. But it doesn't seem like Mike was always willing to wait.
Because that would be my assumption. Is sometimes you gotta take what you get, what you're given, and live with it, work with it. And that's my hunch, is that they just, like you said, didn't have the patience. Said, make things happen now. Shazam.
Well, it was a bit of a hotbed here. I mean, in regards to talent coming in from all over the globe at this point, literally Japan, Mexico, England, everybody's trying to come here to the States and cut their teeth, or maybe some of them looking for the long term, like a Chris Adams or an Adrian Street. But at the same time, Mr. Go, Mr. Toyo, Kimura, and Ryuma Go, and Kobayashi, they're just kind of coming through for a month or two, and they're going to win some titles, lose some titles throughout the summer here, and that's going to take us into the month of August. And we're going to see the Black Gordman come back through here because, so Mr. Toyo and Mr. Go, I should point out, Rusher Kimura, Ryuma Go, they win the tag team titles. They lose those to Mondo Guerrero and Hector Guerrero on their way out. Meanwhile, Kid Kobe has won the America's Heavyweight title throughout the summer of '82, and he's going to drop it to Black Gordman on his way out at the end of the summer. So they push all of the Japanese talent to the point where they give them all belts, but now it's time to go, time to move on, and maybe they can't pay him anymore because we're coming to a close here by the end of the summer anyway with LeBell. So all the Japanese talent are leaving. They're losing all the belts, and the belts go back to the tried and true guys. Mondo and Hector are the tag team champions, Black Gordman, the heavyweight champion.
Yes, and with the Japanese wrestlers, LeBell had a really strong relationship with the Inoki promotion. My hunch is that it was all planned ahead of time that like Ramura, Go, Kid Kobe would come in for a set amount of time and then go back. And the other thing you would see frequently is if a wrestler in the United States was wrestling in Japan, he'd usually do a layover flight where he would go to LA airport, maybe stay a night there or two there, work on one of LeBell's shows just for a one-shot appearance, and then go to Japan for their tour.
Right.
And one of the most comical things, if you got me a result sheet for all the LA matches in 81 and 82, there are several times where you'll see results of matches that didn't happen. And the reason I say that is sometimes the wrestlers who were coming to or from Japan and were having the Olympic Auditorium as their great layover, sometimes they just didn't show up to the shows. And there was a newsletter writer, I can't remember what his name was, but he knew how wrestling worked in that if you're, just stopping in for one night to Japan, you're going to put over the local hero or villain or whatever. But he didn't stop to see, like, if any matches were changed or anything. Mm-hmm. So like he had Dynamite Kid listed as having been there and competed and losing. When Dynamite Kid, another was Stan Lane, they just said, nah, we don't feel like working tonight. We're not going.
Well, I mean, that's kind of where we are. And that's what gets us into this predicament to begin with, is it's just because if this was a town worth working in, and no offense to all the fans of Los Angeles and things, but you have to imagine the guys would have made the shot. And obviously, maybe some of them just wanted to see the sights. I don't really know what was going on, or having a good time on the beach or the bars, or
like I said, it wasn't a straight flight to and from Japan a lot of times.
Sure.
The one I would love to ask is Stan Lane, because he didn't show up and he was supposed to face the Monster. And I'd love to just be able to ask him.
Good call, sweet Stan.
Did you show up? Did you show up because of the beaches, or did you stay home so you wouldn't have to wrestle Frankenstein?
Oh man, that would have been tremendous. Man, he could have had that on his checklist of things he's accomplished. The fabulous ones, the Midnight Express, and I wrestled the Monster. Top 3 things right there.
Yes.
That would have been tremendous, sweet Stan. What are you doing out there? Oh my goodness.
Well, who's that politician out there right now who claims he was swept away by a UFO and taken to a Waffle House? I mean,
right.
Stan Lane could have good company if he said, "Oh, I wrestled a guy dressed in Frankenstein, but when we locked up, it is Frankenstein. It's a monster.
Oh my goodness,
I wrestled a monster."
And I'm so thankful that I had you here to cover the Monster in depth, because that was just it's going all the way back to when we talked about this in the past. So I don't want to beat it to death, but back to when they first introduced that to the YouTube, many years ago when it was first put on there, I said, oh my gosh, this is it. I've heard about this for years, the Monster, and getting to see a little bit of that. So very cool stuff. And hopefully we'll see more of the Monster pop back up down the road here in the world of YouTube. Now, in regards to listings, results here for LeBell, I don't know the final definitive week LeBell's in operation. The final full card I have, though, I wanted to go over just real quick here. August 27th, 1982, and I know there's going to be many more shows in the Olympic, but I don't know necessarily under the LeBell promotion. But Killer Kim over White Shadow, Billy Anderson defeating Chico Flores, Sonia Sanchez defeating Linda Street, Adrian Street, Miss Linda for those of you curious, Black Gordman and Kid Kobe doing a return match. So the week prior, Gordman had won the America's title from Kobe. This is the return match going to a double countout. And the final match is Mondo and Hector Guerrero defeating Timothy Flowers and Adrian Street to close out the night. And that's kind of where we are as far as the talent goes leading into the final days of LeBell territory.
I do know they went pretty late into the year. I couldn't give you an exact date, but I remember we had not gone to a LeBell show for quite some time at some point. And forgive my memory, but I want to say it's November, but I'm not certain. And I remember being at the Olympic Auditorium, and that was one time where I will say the card that night was so scant that, you just had this feeling, how long can this go on where they have 200 people paid?
An arena this size, yeah.
It looks so empty, and you're having this championship match that you've been, a tag team championship match that you've been hyping, and it's so exciting that 200 people came to see it. And, it's not that the wrestlers on the show weren't good or anything. They were, but they were all undercard material or, somebody just kind of passing through. And if you had told me that night, if somebody kind of gossiped you saying, hey, I heard LeBell's going to sell, I would say, well, that doesn't sound far-fetched.
Relive the glory days of Memphis wrestling with the Retro Wrestling Review USWA podcast. Each week, we go back in time to review USWA Championship Wrestling from the 1990s, episode by episode. Join us for watch-alongs, behind-the-scenes stories, and exclusive interviews with people who were there and lived it. Whether you grew up watching it or you're discovering it for the first time, this podcast is your ringside seat to Memphis wrestling history. It's all a part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Listen now at USWApodcast.com.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here. Lots of new stuff happening here at WrestleCopia, and I want to update you on everything going on with the brand right now. First and simple, if you haven't checked out our website at WrestleCopia.com, it's a great way to keep up with the latest episodes of all of your favorite Copia programming, from the Wrestling Memory Grenade to Regional Rasslin with the Territory Talk, the Wrestling Stoop with the legendary Bob Roop, Professor Dan Ginnity and the Pro Wrestling Academy, and all the other great podcasts from Gene Jackson, Bob Smith, Dave Dynasty, and the boys from the Other Ship. And of course, all of those programs also available at your favorite podcast streaming platforms. And if you want to stay up to date with everything going on in the Copia world, all the latest news, random thoughts, fun videos, pictures, and more, make sure to join the more than 33,000 followers over at Facebook.com/WrestlingGrenade. Don't be left out. Please also follow us at the former Twitter, now X, at Wrestling Grenade, and subscribe to YouTube.com/WrestlingGrenade. Would also greatly appreciate you leaving us a 5-star review at your favorite podcast apps, guys, because every positive review makes our podcasts more visible in the algorithms, if you will, which allows us to continue to grow. Now, for those who have been asking about merchandise, WrestleCopia merch, you can find plenty of designs for our t-shirts, hats, magnets, stickers, coffee mugs, and more over at the TeePublic store. That is tpublic.com/user/WrestleCopia. And last but definitely not least, it's what keeps the entire machine going. I'm talking about patreon.com/WrestleCopia. Now with 3 major tiers and tons of Patreon exclusive next level content for our supporters. Remember, guys, no subscription, cancel any time, but I think you'll like the content that we're offering there for any budget you may have. And you can sign up right now, patreon.com/WrestleCopia. We appreciate your support in helping us pay the bills to keep the WrestleCopia Podcast Network running and enabling us to continue to bring you all the quality programming that we offer.
Hey, it's Bob Smith, and guess what? The Outdated Wrestling Hour is now part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. But hey, no fear, you're still going to hear the unique guests, comedy, music, authors, journalists, funny people. Who knows who's going to end up on the Outdated Wrestling Hour? Remember, it's all new and all old. So check it out in the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and wherever you get your podcasts. Listen, if you know what's good for you.
I took a bunch of final research notes here. I definitely wanted to hit on before we close out this story here. And I know I've got random results, just bits and pieces, matches that happened beyond this August card I just read, but that was the last full card I had results for. So I wanted to give everybody kind of an idea of what we were looking at here as far as the territory went. But there was a lot of other stuff going on throughout this time. And remember, we talked about this in the last episode. For anybody who doesn't recall, please go back. I don't know how many episodes back. It's been a while, Vandal, but I encourage everybody to go back and listen to all the great knowledge that Vandal is throwing at us, both for the talent and the things going on in the world of the LA scene at the time. But Mike LeBell had been away from the Olympic for a bit there, but he returned where I started with these results here in March of 1982. But within 3 months, financially, the bottom falls out. He loses his Lucha Libre television program on KMX. That's no more after, I think, 12 year, I think it was, run by this point. They try to rally the fans, call up the station and tell them you want us back, but it really goes nowhere. And so at the same time, though, we've talked about this in the past as well. Louis Miller shuts down in 1980, and Leone comes in, and he begins running all around Sacramento, Stockton, Oakland, things like that there. But then he expands down here into Bakersfield and Fresno. And Fresno was somewhere that LeBell was running to, so there's some direct competition going on. And that means competition, kind of like Raw and Nitro. You know, you got guys jumping from territory to territory, if you will. So Tom Ernesto, who was the booker, he orders Tom Hankins, a friend of yours, of course, a former wrestler himself, and Hankins has since passed away. We discussed that on the last episode we did together. But he orders Hankins to stop working for Leone. Now, you can correct me when I'm done with this story. This is a story that I picked up from 3 different sources here, and I kind of pieced it all together. So if you heard differently from Tom or know another variation, please enlighten us when I'm finished here with this. But apparently Hankins refused to stop working for the enemy, the outlaw promotion of Leone, because he paid more money than LeBell. So Tom's going to get fired from the LeBell territory here in March of 82. And on his way out, I mean, it says everything about the territory. Hankins' final match versus Mondo Guerrero, as best I could find, draws only roughly 200 fans. Now, it was supposed to go 30 minutes, but story goes that 10 minutes in, Hankins just calls it and tells Guerrero to pin me. I'm done here. I'm out of here. So nobody says a word about this. Apparently, guys calling their own finishes, and there's no real control left behind the scenes. This is kind of the respect that LeBell's getting here in 1982.
Yeah, I do remember that. In fact, the only thing Tom Hankins might have been exaggerating was I think it went more like 3 minutes.
Okay. So that sounds even worse, to take it home in 3. I mean, in a good way, worse. I mean, to take it home in 3 minutes.
Oh, yeah. It was like, he was a wrestler, but I think he'd even tell you himself he's 1 part wrestler, 5 parts avid fan. Okay. And I think he wanted to wrestle where not just the money was better, but he liked to wrestle in some place that's kind of like an aura, that has an aura of the old school, even back then. I think he liked hanging with people like, who were some of the people? Like Tony Rocco, Roger Kirby, Steve Bolus. I remember they would talk about the territories that Bolus worked. So I think part of it was financial, but the other part was I think he just had a lot more fun wrestling for Leone. It was a real... you never knew what you were going to see when you went to a Leone card. Sometimes it might be just local boys, but sometimes people coming through. Tor Kamada just was passing through one night and put over one of the local boys clean. So whenever you went there, you could expect either just the locals wrestling, or you could expect a surprise.
You never knew who was going to pop up. I love that. That's fun times, man. That's
Yes. And that's one of the things I love about Tom Hankins was he would admit he wasn't the greatest wrestler in the world, but his heart for the business was only surpassed by, even though he wouldn't show it a lot, his wife. And when his wife passed, I think that kind of took all the fuel out of my dear friend Charlie, as we always called him.
Charlie Reed, one of its many aliases.
Yeah.
Well, by the end of 82, though, even Leone's out of the business. He's shutting down his promotion. He leaves wrestling altogether as well. So he had a little bit of a fun time here promoting, but maybe not fun enough to make enough money to stay in the business. So Leone's out. LeBell's out by the end. LeBell's situation, it's not a slow demise. It's just a demise. I feel like you're in 1982. The situation just keeps falling out of his hands. He loses television. Yes. And now the local channel 34 begins airing WWF matches, signaling a major shift in wrestling.
Yeah.
Vince McMahon Jr. has stepped in. By the fall of 1982, he has announced, it's official, that he's purchased the company from his father. Vince Sr. is kind of fading into the background. And so by October of 82, Vince McMahon walks in here, and I believe it's right around that time period, he cuts a deal with LeBell, buys control of Southern California for a reported $520,000. He promised to pay $2,000 a week over the course of 10 years. It's a pretty good chunk of change, $520,000 in 1982 money. My goodness.
The funniest thing about them showing the older WWF TV tapings on the UHF channel that did have the LeBell Wrestling, it was funny because we found out from somebody working in the office that LeBell was going to sell, but we were told don't tell anybody. And not only did we not tell anybody, but LeBell Promotion didn't tell anybody. Here they were. It's late December, and they're showing matches from WWF, the TV tapings.
Right.
And they're still announcing the annual Battle Royal and still riding with the wrestlers that were currently with LeBell. And us, being the little brats we were and knowing that LeBell was selling, when we see Jeff Walton say, fans, you don't want to be one of the ones left out in the rain when the Battle Royal sells out this year. So call that number, Richmond 95171. Get your tickets now. And so we just kept calling the Olympic over and over again, acting really excited about the Battle Royal, and eventually they took the phone off the hook.
Wow, tremendous.
Yeah.
You bastards. So, well,
I know. I mean, it's a little brat.
It's, if you're a wrestling fan from any specific like watching Georgia Championship Wrestling, when Vince just shows up on the air there, it's clearly a very different product, right? From taping in Pennsylvania to what you guys have been familiar with in the Coliseum or any of that, any of the talent completely shifts and changes. But the only thing I think that stays the same is LeBell. He's still around. He's still, I think, in between kind of promoting the shows. He's handling the advertising and supplying the local talent, some of the underneath guys, the preliminary matches anyway, for when Vince comes over to the West Coast. So Vince starts digging his teeth, his claws into the territory, asking why there's no English language TV. He's told they never recovered after losing Channel 13 years ago, which he can't believe, pal. So McMahon supposedly, the story goes, Vince flies out to L.A. How the hell do you have an American promotion without English-speaking language? So Jeff Walton takes Vince down to KHJ, Channel 9, and in about 45 minutes, the deal is done. That's New York City business right there, Vandal. So starting January 1st, 1983, WWF landing a weekly Saturday morning time slot at 11 a.m. Yeah,
it's interesting. My friend Dan Farron and I remember we interviewed Jeff Walton, it was early in our friendship. It was like early 90s, I think it was. And he talked about that time and how he did a lot of he wrote up the programs for Vince. WWF as they were coming in. He was working with him briefly, and to show that he probably saw pretty clearly, whereas a lot of people had a lot of faith in LeBell. He said that LeBell wanted him to sell his house, bring his family back to Connecticut, and be a part of the family, part of the WWF family. Jeff did not do that, and he said, even back then, he knew that Vince had a habit of firing people, hiring them just to fire them and humiliate them. And he saw the writing on the wall. I didn't know that was a thing.
I respect Jeff and everything, that he did for the business. But at the same time, I feel like Vince had plans for Jeff to maybe run the magazine from the way they were promoting it on TV.
That is the case.
So I don't know necessarily I wasn't there. I don't know. I'm certainly not going to pretend like I have any idea what was actually going on in the mind of Vince McMahon, of anybody on the face of the earth. I don't even know if Vince knows what's going on in his own mind at times. But it seems like he had a place.
Too.
Yeah, it seems like he had a place for Jeff. At least, it would have been brief, though, because we know eventually he's going to do the Victory magazine before he just pivots and does straight up WWF magazine, and they don't need Robert DeBorg or whatever anymore. So this is where Vince changes the entire game, though, in regards to television, because he's not there to negotiate a deal with the TV station. He's going to buy the time. It's paid programming, the World Wrestling Federation. Vince offering to pay $2,500 a week for some airtime. Something promoters they weren't ready for. Vince is going to find his own advertisers. And if that's not enough, he's going to sweeten the deal. He's going to keep paying that weekly fee. Plus, he offers the station a cut of the gate when he runs shows in the local area. That's unheard of.
And once that's in play, how do you fight it?
Yeah, and that's just a meticulous business, from Vince McMahon right out of the gate. Clearly, he had a plan before he even took over the company from his father.
Yes, because I hear a lot of people say Vince came in, took LeBell's promotion, and he won the war. But there was no war. It was merely he sold it to Vince McMahon. It wasn't like they were battling it out, trying to prove who could outbook who.
Well, everybody likes to paint Vince as the bad guy. Everybody likes to paint Vince as the bad guy, and for a lot of reasons, he probably is the bad guy. But in one side, I look at it as this is business, for one, at the end of the day, but also some of the narratives that are out there, like you just said, Vandal, or that, Vince stole this territory or he took this from this guy. There were quite a few promoters that came to Vince and said, make me an offer, or Vince went to them and said, this is my offer, and they sold out to the WWF. And this is one of those cases, LeBell here in Los Angeles. He didn't necessarily need to sell to Vince because Vince could have came in there and taken it all on his own, it sounds like, to some degree anyway.
Yeah.
But with the help of, Walton going down there to the TV station and getting Vince in so that Vince could make this apparently very quick deal. And I guess they liked the money they were being offered from McMahon and crew. So I think you just said this a few minutes ago, but the impact was immediate. How do you compete is what you said. So the move flips the entire business and undercuts every traditional promoter that we know of here, the territory system. So from a station's view, it's a no-brainer. This guy's offering us X amount of dollars every week, no matter what, and a cut of whatever he draws when he's bringing his company here to the West Coast. So you drop the local show, you take the guaranteed money, and you air more polished WWF product with, dare I say, better production, or at least eventually better production.
Much better production. So, for California, it marks the end of California being a regional promotion, or, where it used to be Roy Shire versus LeBell, but they respected each other's territories. The territory's just gone. Now it's up to, indie promoters to just have something there if you want a little variety from WWF. But, I don't think there's anybody who is going to come in after that and say, hey, I think I'm going to try to make this place a territory again.
Right.
That was kind of like probably the loudest door slamming shut.
Well,
just like, okay, bye-bye territory. Welcome WWF. Welcome, welcome to a national promotion. I mean, it really was a unique time.
All good things must come to an end, they say, and anybody who grew up on the LeBell territory is witnessing the end right now. And some may say that it was time, maybe, based on the way things were being run. But and I want, before anybody jumps on me, they listen to this program and they start jumping, this guy don't know his ass from a hole in the ground, whatever. I am fully aware that other promoters had paid for TV before. I want to be very clear about that. But Vince just does it completely differently here, just on a bigger scale, way more aggressive, guaranteed money, etc. And he clearly makes those payments to the TV station because the rest is history. He's going to be continuing to do that in various markets. But, it's like we've said on multiple episodes, including this one, Mike LeBell, he wasn't a wrestling purist. He comes from the box office side of things. So it wasn't book me a great match. It was simple. Sell tickets, fill the seats. That's how Mike, thought. It was just make me money.
Yes. Exactly.
And that doesn't mesh well with a wrestling-minded guy like a booker, which is why he would hire random bookers. And I've mentioned this on various different other shows that I've done. It's one thing when the Cowboy, Bill Watts, is bringing in a booker, Ernie Ladd, Bill Dundee, whatever, Buck Robley, whatever the case may be. The Cowboy's there to funnel things, but he's also there, and he knows if this guy knows what they're doing, what they're talking about, how to fix it. Mike LeBell may not have been able to do that. You know what I mean? When Chavo might not be going in the vision, or something's not working, or whomever the booker is here, Tom Ernesto at this point in time. So it's a very different situation here with Mike LeBell, the promoter, versus, say, Eddie Graham, Bill Watts, and guys like that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think, because you can say a lot of positive and negative things about Mike LeBell, but I suspect he knew this would be a losing battle if it were come to being a battle. So he sold. And like you said, he didn't tug at his heartstrings, or how should I say, wrestling didn't tug at his heartstrings. They tugged at his pocketbook. And I suspect one of the mistakes other regional promoters made was thinking that WWF was like a fad, like Rocky Horror. It will have its day in the sun as this, this huge spectacle, but then it will go away. I knew fans, and I knew one or two people working in other offices. They said the older promoters just thought, oh, we just got to ride this wave through, and we'll get back to doing towns. And sometimes all that experience, you have many years of promoting or wrestling, and sometimes you forget that you got to change with the business.
That's right. The evolution.
Roy Shire took Joe Malkowitz's promotion largely because he got TV, and Joe Malkowitz thought TV is a waste of time, this new, discombobulating device. But I think a lot of old promoters just don't go with changes. They like to do tried and true.
And they didn't learn from the mistakes of those who were their predecessors, because, Cowboy Luttrell never decided, he didn't touch the TV till Eddie Graham got there and created the television program in Florida and brought in Gordon Soley. And it's like you just said, too. I mean, they didn't learn from the mistakes of the guys before them when they weren't moving on with the times. And now here it is, the next wave of guys who are not moving on with the times. Meanwhile, Vince McMahon has this giant vision here. And the last result I could find that was under the NWA Hollywood banner actually goes all the way to December 26th of 1982, which makes sense because Vince takes over the TV wholeheartedly. January 1st is when the deal is made. But I love the idea that that the TV was already being syndicated in from the WWF market. You realize the difference in the product. So you guys were having fun there on the way out, but you guys realized that.
Yeah, we felt like the cool kids in class that didn't know what time it is when everybody else does business as usual.
Right, exactly. So the last show I could find here that was actually the Hollywood talent, though, is December 26th in San Bernardino. That's pretty much the beginning of the end of LeBell and his promotion. Hector Guerrero scoring a victory in the main event. Billy Anderson retaining the TV title and retiring it. Bittersweet that night. It's it. That's the end of the LeBell territories. Talk of coming back. Like you just said, lots of promoters talked about, we'll ride this out. We'll wait to see what happens. Maybe LeBell will be back. But at that point, the Southern California territory as a territory is finished.
And there weren't a lot of independent shows. There were some, but that was when you were still under the watch of the California State Athletic Commission.
Right.
And it wasn't until 1990 when the Athletic Commission no longer had power over the wrestling community. They were still there for boxing. I don't know what else. But when that ended gradually, you saw wrestling promotions, indie promotions just pop up like weeds. You'd go from maybe 3 different promoters who are trying to get matches or trying to promote shows here and there, but it's more costly. With the Athletic Commission, you have to put a lot more money into your product. You have to get insurance, all sorts of stuff. It's a time and a monetary hassle. And suddenly, they're not under the watch of the Athletic Commission, and promoters say, hey, let's put on a show. It's almost like those old Little Rascals comedies where, the kids, put up a boxing ring that they made themselves in a backyard. I mean, you found stuff like that. Everybody started promoting, and some of it was very good promotions, but to this day, there's wrestling everywhere. I mean, if the Athletic Commission started being the watchdog over the wrestlers again, you'd find a lot less shows.
Right.
But it was actually kind of funny just seeing kind of the rhythm throughout the 80s, people trying to get TV for a local show or, trying to promote regularly on every Saturday. And then suddenly early 90s, people are just promoting anywhere and everywhere. Everywhere from bingo halls to, pretty nice, like maybe 3,000 plus arenas.
Right.
And yes, it's just interesting to see what happened when WWF took over and then when the Athletic Commission disappeared.
It's fun to, I read Ole Anderson's book a while back, and I could be wrong on the exact amount of time he said, but he said something like, when you're going to invade a new market, you want to at least have TV in that city, in that town for 3 months leading into your first show to have time to get over the guys, get over the talent, get over the storylines, get over, the fact that this is a wrestling company, basically. And now you want to go watch the thing. And so Vince McMahon, just very similar in Ole fashion there. You said they start, showing matches there near the end of 1982 on the LeBell program. And then Vince taking over the TV completely by the beginning of 83. March of 83, the WWF walk into town. They run San Diego and Los Angeles back-to-back nights. But Mike LeBell is there listed as the promoter. He's locally, he's the promoter. He's doing little ads and things like that on TV. And you can kind of get an idea of what they're going for here because, yes, Andre the Giant's on the card, Bob Backlund, Tom Morocco, Hulk Hogan, all these big names, but they're also bringing in Mil Mascaras. They're using some local talent, Gordman and Goliath, Tony Rocco, your boy Jack Armstrong, Rick Drayson, Billy Anderson. Doyle. Yes, so they're still using a lot of the familiar talent to comfort food, basically, for the local fans, right? Like, I know these guys, so this isn't all that bad after all. And then you bring in the larger-than-life guys, and they bring in a battle royal right out of the gate, so you get your Los Angeles battle royal per se.
Yes, exactly. And it's funny because I was at the very first LA show. I can't remember how much it was, but by no means a sellout, but it was a good, healthy crowd. I'm sure somebody has the attendance written down somewhere. But I got the feeling most of the people I shouldn't say most of the people, but a good percentage of the people who were there that night, you overhear them speaking, "Oh, wow, I'm so glad we have wrestling again. Remember the days of like Blassie and Tolis 10 years back?" Some of them weren't aware that LeBell Wrestling was still happening, especially after they had Channel 13 taken away from them. They had it was always Spanish stations. And so I think a good percentage of that audience were people who were like, "Oh boy, professional wrestling is back." I'm so jazzed. These were young adults, a lot of them remembering going to the Olympic, and several of them at least were saying like, "Yeah, we were wondering why it went away," and I said, "No, it was here."
Yeah, no, I've seen things like that happen, at other times too. Like wrestling never really went away in certain areas; it just fell out of favor, and losing that TV was probably a huge. It was a huge black mark, really, on the entire face of trying to promote LA to the English-speaking only audience types that weren't necessarily hardcore fans like yourself. So I could see where that would go away. But I look at who they bring in, and they bring in a lot of guys who would at least, if not were there for long periods of time, they certainly stopped through LA. Superstar Billy Graham, Pat Patterson, Ray Stevens, so Buddy Rose. So there's a lot of guys here on these WWF cards coming in here. They're coming in hot. They're bringing the big guns and familiar talent. And it works out for Vince. LA becomes a big market for the WWF. They'll eventually start airing house show matches on the Z channel for a while there in the late 1980s.
Oh, I forgot about those. I totally forgot about it. I always wondered what was the story behind that.
Yeah, I think Jack Armstrong worked one of those under a hood there. Yeah, so. Yeah,
he did. And what did I say with... Oh, damn, I was in the middle of thought. Everybody has the honor of hearing me getting older. I was thinking of something a half a minute ago, and it's totally out of my mind now. But yeah, I do think that there were a lot of people who were just discovering wrestling because it was on Channel 9 and on a Saturday morning, when kids are flipping the channel.
Yeah. The more things change, the more they stay the same. I'll say this here in the Cleveland market, when WWF joined Fox, when Fox first became a thing in the mid-'80s, they came on for a good damn near 10 years straight at 11 a.m. on Saturday mornings. It was perfect timing. The cartoons are ending, and instead of getting up and going outside, I'm sticking around another hour to watch my WWF wrestling. So perfect position and timing for Vince here to come on. Like you said, after years of not being in the English-speaking channels, they're right back at it. The WWF taking over Los Angeles, at least the big market of Los Angeles. Now, you happen to know, Vandal, there were a lot of other small promotions still running around here after LeBell folded. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about your memories of that scene that was going on, the underground, if you will, of Los Angeles?
Yeah. In fact, I just remember what I was going to say a few minutes ago with when Eileen Eaton lost the wrestling on Channel 13. She had also, for a number of years, had boxing on that same channel on Thursday night. the live on Thursday nights, just like they did the wrestling live on Wednesday nights. But I was looking through newspapers.com, and when she lost the TV, it appears that she tried to play hardball with Channel 13 and said, if you're taking us off the air, then you can't show our boxing also.
Right,
and
correct,
they just said,
they called her bluff.
Okay. Yeah, au revoir. Yeah, we were that. I have no idea what the conversation was, but
right.
I think they were like, oh, well, no more boxing. Oh, well.
Well, they called her bluff.
But, the early, 1983, when, LeBell was no longer there, you would occasionally get excited about people coming in to promote. The best stuff was the local luchadors. And the hard thing is nobody for some time promoted with any regularity, except for the Lucha Libre shows that would have their matches at Hadco Plaza every Saturday, early evening. And I think they were there at Hadco Plaza pretty reliably each week for 2 or 3 years. I'll have to ask one of the locals. But even when they didn't have the Hadco Plaza shows on Sunday, there was always somebody just trying to get something going, trying to start a bit of a fire and, take notice get LeBell to take notice. But he really didn't have to worry about anything, in my opinion, because, a lot of the guys who were promoting, they didn't really understand the business very well. And, I think Vince probably knew there was nothing to worry about there. But the only time I heard about any kind of involvement as far as WWF or the LeBell family worrying about people coming in to take over the promotion, when the local luchadors in the early 70s were promoting shows on and off. I can't remember is when they got to running regular shows at Hadco Plaza, where the commission had them come in and just present like a laundry list of what they were kind of trying to accomplish, what they were trying to do. And, Superboy was a kid who used to tag along with his dad. Superboy, meaning the Superboy of Michinoku Pro. But his dad, El Moro, was one of the bookers for the Hadco Plaza shows. And, they were called in to have a meeting with the athletic commission. And the one thing Superboy remembers, they were all having to answer questions for this one lady. And he had mentioned she has something to do with the boxing. So I take that to be Eileen Eaton. And, they were asking, why are you doing these shows? Are you trying to get TV? Are you trying to compete with us? And after they gave their presentation, the athletic commission, or should I say the LeBell family, said, nah, these guys are cool. They're not like, trying to like take over the territory or anything.
Right.
So the LeBell family likely had pull with the athletic commission.
Well, that totally makes sense. I can see why they would have their hand in that cookie jar, or vice versa, if you will. But, during this time period, though, as LeBell the territory was coming to an end, Vince McMahon was getting ready to take over, there were other promotions running in said city here in Los Angeles at the Olympic, no less, at the same time that, LeBell was still trying to run a few shows around town. And one of them's out there on YouTube from October 1982. I want to thank Matt D for turning me onto this on Twitter. He sent me the link. It's been up on YouTube for a few years now. I saw it a few years back.
Oh, really?
Forgot all about it.
If you could give me that link, I'd be very curious to see what that is.
Well, I'll read the card to you right here. Super Astro versus Captain De Oro. Black Shadow and his final...
Capitan Oro, that's Superboy's big brother.
And Black Shadow's retirement match. Black Shadow, Santo De Oro.
I was there.
Hurricane Ramirez versus Serio El Hermoso, Bello Greco, and El Medico. So there's
El Medico, who was a local boy named Jalisco number 1.
Jalisco.
He wrestled earlier in the LeBell as Apollo Jalisco, and then he donned the mask.
The Medico mask there. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
The Medico, yeah.
I've got footage of him under both gimmicks. Yeah, that's cool. I was wondering if that was the same Medico. Sonia Ariana versus Marlene, and Sonia had worked Miss Linda some here in the summer of '82 for LeBell, but here she is working this this show as well.
Yeah, I assume she was one of Mildred Burke's girls, and I only remember seeing her wrestle a few times. She wasn't bad, She's a cute little gal too. She was really adorable. But I remember that show. I even have, I think, some pics from that show.
Where were you sitting?
That was
we
the
can
first time
spot you there on the YouTube. I'll send you a link.
Oh yeah, just look for somebody at ringside with the bleached blonde hair, and that's me.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to spotting you now. I'm going to go back and watch the entire card. Tony Rocco teaming with Gallo Tapado versus El Cobarde.
Yes.
In Mariah del Ring.
Yeah, Mariah del Ring was a local boy. I think he passed away just about maybe 4 or 5 years ago. El Cobarde very sadly passed away just maybe a year after this match. He had cancer, and he was somebody who was a top draw in Mexico, not top draw as in Mil Mosquers, but he was a main eventer.
I get you.
Good worker.
That's a different tier, Vandal. Nobody's Mil Mosquer. It's a different level of
exactly.
I get you. I get you.
In fact, I do have a photo of Tony Rocco suplexing Cobarde.
Oh, very cool.
And
From this event?
One of the photos I like to brag about. I think I have it in one of my albums on Facebook.
From this event?
Yes.
Oh, very cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And final match here, Mando Lopez and Cato Fumask versus Migra Primera y Tony Curiel.
Oh, Migra. Migra was a great gimmick that, I can't remember. I don't know who was La Migra on that particular show.
Okay.
But, that's the immigration officer. I can't remember the name of the man who was doing the gimmick then, but a few years up the road when they started promoting Lucha Libre at the Olympic again, around the era when Negro Casas had his hair versus mask with Hijo de Santo. They had 2 of the local boys as Los Migra, and the funniest part, both of them were 2 local Mexican wrestlers, 2 of the guys playing the illegal immigrant chasers.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I'm not exactly a thesaurus here today, am I? But there was 2 local boys playing the role of La Migra. And oh my God, I never in my life have seen so much garbage thrown into a wrestling ring.
Wow. Okay.
And each time they went over, and the heat was just over the top.
Man, imagine if somebody worked that gimmick today.
Oh God, yeah. And it's funny because I knew of the other La Migra in the Hodco Plaza days, but he got some heat. But these 2 guys, one of the guys was Superboy's brother, or I think it was Principe Indu, if I remember correctly, was one of the Migras. And the last match they had before the Olympic was shut down for a while was against Halcon and Halcon 78. And they ended with a stretcher job for one of the Halcons. And even as they were putting the guy in the stretcher, people are still like hurling shit into the ring. And I wish I could have stepped in the ring, because I would guarantee you I was probably would have been like shin deep in all the crap people were throwing. That was a fun night.
I'm envious of you and all of the events that you attended. Even this one right here. Luckily, some footage exists, so I will be sending you the link. It's like I said, it's been on YouTube for a few years. I don't know how it escaped my memory. I started watching it a while back, and I want to thank Matt D for turning me back onto it. I said, holy shit, I totally forgot about this. And so
oh my God, yeah. Anything that looks interesting, please send my way, because whether I have seen it or not, man, it's always fun to just go on a little time travel trip.
Well, you got it, man. I'll be sending that your way, and anybody curious, you guys can go check it out. I believe it's labeled Azteca Promotions, Lucha Libre, Olympic Auditorium. Again, the date was October 16th, 1982. That's up on YouTube, and it's some fun old school Lucha Libre style action. And unfortunately, the action for this episode has come to an end, much like the LeBell territory. Vandal, we have to wrap things up here on the story of the demise of the Los Angeles territory, unfortunately.
Well, I hope I've wrapped it up without too many the LeBellian F maneuvers, no monsters or no Bigfoots or...
Kind of disappointed in that.
No, I'll brag about that one if I did.
Yeah, I want to go. Yeah, I would too. I don't blame you, man. And we could have really went out with a bang had they brought back just one more gimmick on the way out the door, but it just wasn't meant to be. But it was another fun time with you. It's been too long, man, and I don't want that to be a thing again. So hopefully we're going to have you back here soon with a new project and some more discussions about some of the maybe rarer promotions or at least the talent that came through the Los Angeles territory that, you had the pleasure of working around or hanging out with, and memories of attending as a fan and photographer, if you will, and things of that nature. So what we're going to do next with Vandal, I don't know, but I want to keep this guy around. How about you guys out there? I think they're all saying yes. So
I do. Yes, please. More Vandal. No, seriously. Southern California has a really rich wrestling history, both big time and indie. So, put our heads together and find some subjects. You could probably come up with a lot of subjects when it comes to Southern California pro wrestling. So let's put our heads together and come up with some good subjects.
Now, remember, guys, Rock Rims, if you guys can find him, if he's still putting out the books right now, he put out several amazing books on not only LeBell, but also the Shire territory, and lots of great history there if you guys want to go back and really do some digging and learn a lot more about the West Coast wrestling territories, but also the Walton family, Dave Meltzer, again, Tim Hornbaker, and the list goes on for everybody who was able to make this possible in regards to all the research and everything that I put together here. But I think we did the best we could as me as just a huge fan, and you as kind of living through the era, but maybe not always there every week. It's great that you were attending some of the shows and getting to witness some of this great stuff, including that little October deal we just talked about for the Azteca promotion. So it was a fun ride. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, we all know who wins this one. It was Vince McMahon. And for anybody curious how he took over this particular territory, now you know the rest of the story.
And what a story it was.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you, Vandal, for being here, man. Looking forward to having you back here very soon.
Oh, I am so looking forward to it. And
right,
thank
guys.
you for having me on.
Oh, man, my pleasure. And you're welcome back anytime, guys. Don't think this is the end of Vandal Drummond by any stretch of the imagination. He'll be back soon. We'll continue to talk all about Los Angeles wrestling and whatever the hell else our heart desires. Until next time, we'll see you soon. More Regional Rasslin on the way.